Smith, Ashland Electric Bikes across the shop. That's how Nikki and Jordan know me. I actually gave a talk about electric bikes here, I think a couple of years ago now. Part of the reason I'm even in electric bikes is because I'm a sustainability nut. So I used to work in manufacturing. I have an engineering degree. I worked for companies like General Motors and Unilever. I came to the Valley because of Amy's Kitchen. I was on this vegetarian kick. I wanted to work for a company that was making high quality food instead of a lot of the processed stuff that we eat that I wouldn't necessarily call food these days. And I really made a change in my world in 2019 when I quit that manufacturing world to build a tiny house, to reduce my footprint, live more simply. And I had the intent of starting what I would call a zero waste store in 2020. I was actually looking at places I was considering leasing or renting. And then, as we all know, COVID happened, and I'm really glad it happened when it did, because I was going to sign on the line probably in April of 2020, and because it all reared its head right before, I didn't move forward with that, gratefully, because I probably would have been stuck in a lease I couldn't have paid because I wouldn't have been able to start my store. That left me in a spot of what do I do next, and that's actually how I found my way to Ashland Electric Bikes. I am not a bicyclist by nature. People find that weird. I had not been on a bike in years before I bought that shop, but what drew me to it was this idea of replacing my car with a bike. So I don't do a lot of trail rides or just for fun exercise rides. I really use it to commute, and I get from Phoenix, Oregon right now to my shop as many days as possible. There's days where timing constraints or I have to pick up a customer's bike or move a bike out of storage, I need my car. But otherwise I try to ride my bike as much as possible, and so that's where biking comes into a sustainability standpoint for me. And I talk about my business a lot with these guys, and they get to hear about all the crazy sustainable things I try to do, which is why they thought of me. So does anybody know what the 6 R's are? Any of them?
Reduce, recycle, repair.
Okay, so I think we got 4, might have missed one. Refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, repair, recycle. Kind of in this order for the most part. I think repurpose and repair are often kind of in that a similar vein. Refuse is the first thing we can do to reduce our footprint. And that comes in a lot of different forms. Oops, double click in here. Oh, because I'm supposed to point that way. I apologize. I'll get into the flow here in a little bit. So refuse. I'm not going to read all of these verbatim. I know you guys can do that yourselves, so we'll kind of talk to it a little more broadly. But refusing things we don't need. You know, sometimes it's really tempting that buy one, get one half off or that one free. But if there's an item that you really only need one of and you have no purpose for the second one, it's a waste, right? It's going to sit in a cupboard or a closet, maybe eventually get pitched into the trash, who knows? And at the same time, it's actually kind of an extra strain on your wallet. It's not, you know, get one free or one half off. If it's one free, there's the environmental impact. If it's half off, say it's a $10 item, you get one for half off. Now you've wasted $5 because you really only needed that $10 item, one of them. Refusing things like gifts that you don't need. For me, when I went into a tiny house, that was a really hard thing for me to communicate with people and do it in a gracious and kind way, because they're trying to do something nice for me. But when you live in a tiny house, you do not have space for random gifts all the time. And sometimes it's not even the constraint of how you live. I have friends that will try to do things that are super sweet and give me things that just aren't practical in my living space that I will never use. You know, berry-shaped items because I was so berry sweet to them. You know, it's a cute idea, but not practical for me in my space and how I'm going to use it. And finding a way to communicate what my values are in an understanding way and letting folks know, if you want to give me something, try reusables. I use soap all the time. I have a friend that made me homemade vanilla extract for Christmas because he knows who I am, he knows what my values are, and so he gifts in those ways. But in the early phases, sometimes when we're going through this, it's the refusing and letting people know kindly how to do that. Refusing to follow fads. I see people buy things and we're probably all guilty of it. I've been guilty of it in my past. This is the cool new thing. I have to have it. I don't need it. The thing I have that currently works in its place is perfectly fine, but it's cool and everybody's doing it, right? So some of those changes. Plug for the local folks, refuse disposable packaging. So many of us have gotten our reusable coffee mugs and such. If you don't know about them, Rogue to Go is a reusable container service that you can get in this valley. I often choose the places I will patron with my dollars based on whether they use Rogue to Go. If I'm going to get takeout, I'm going to go to Rozzy or Falafel Republic or something and grab it so I don't have to put trash in the landfill. I'm not creating another single-use item. Basically, it's a container. You take it to them, swap it out. They'll give you a new clean one with your meal in it when you bring your container in. And there's some of the beautiful people at Rozzy and probably some other businesses I'm not specifically sure of, but I know these beautiful faces at Rozzy, so I'm going to shamelessly plug them. Yes?
I'd like to see them go with a container that's deep to put liquids in.
I don't know that it's super deep, but I think this is one that's come more for liquid. So I'm not responsible for that, but again, I'm plugging it. And maybe if they listen to this video, that feedback will be taken. Reduce. So there's a lot of ways to reduce. We can talk about several ways to reduce your food waste, whether that is finding ways to make multiple meals out of something. When I was a single person, I had to get real creative on how I could use one whole cabbage over the course of the week and not eat a million Thai peanut cabbage salads. Or, if you do have waste, composting it, whether that's in your backyard or if you're in an apartment, there's a lot of local pickups, or like Rogue Produce, they have a composting system and a drop-off. I think it's 2 drop-off locations now. So there's a lot of ways to go through and research those things so you can reduce the food waste. Of course, most of us at this point have heard all these things about reducing our energy usage with lights and lowering heat temperatures and whatnot. Taking shorter showers to reduce water. If you have the ability to collect rainwater, use that for your gardens, especially in a place like the Rogue Valley where we keep seeing it dry out and we're always kind of on the edge of fire season. This is a great way to preserve as much water in our reservoirs as possible. One of us isn't going to make all the difference in the world, but when we all do a little bit, it adds up. Emissions, this is where the biking, walking comes into play. And that's really, again, that's why I bike ride. It's to reduce my emissions. I don't really do a lot of pleasure rides. I have a lot of other hobbies that I usually do on the weekends. And then reducing your footprint by shopping local with shops that buy local, make local, support local artists, and grow your own garden. I'll talk a little more about those things, but the shops that you patronize with your money, if you patronize those that are doing things to support local or sustainable initiatives, you're sending a message with your dollars. And ultimately, businesses are going to respond to what you guys are asking for. I had a vendor in my shop today, and he was kind of poo-pooing the 1,000 helmets that are on my shelf. I don't particularly love 1,000 helmets, but they're in my shop because that's what the customers want, right? And so part of our role, there's a role for corporations to do changes and make things differently, but part of what's going to drive them in that direction is us purchasing differently, because they are going to sell us what we're asking for. There are a reason why Doritos are really popular and not everybody's out there buying a green pepper, right? They're a thing that's really tasty and we crave them, and so we buy them. And sometimes it's hard to cut against that grain and do the thing that might be better for us and the planet. Reuse. So there's a lot of reusable items. I can't list them all. I didn't have time to research enough, but these are some just things that came to my head as I was sitting there today. I know cotton rounds, that's one a lot of ladies with makeup and things that they remove will get the disposables. There's flannel versions of those. Obviously handkerchiefs, sometimes people find that gross. I find the fact that my partner always has a handkerchief in his back pocket has saved me a number of times, whether it's been cuts on a hike or throwing some berries in the handkerchief on top of just the general blowing of the nose that we think of. Grocery bags, produce bags, beeswax wraps. I have the beeswax wraps I bought probably 6 years ago now, and I just keep recoating them. Metal razors have been a big one for me. I have not been able to go razor free. I just can't do it. It drives me nuts. But by getting a metal razor where the only thing I have to replace is that little razor blade, and that brand specifically has 3, so I can get a good close shave, I'm limiting and reducing the amount of waste because all that metal can be recycled, and I have a place to recycle that, whereas the plastic doesn't have a place to go. Metal straws are common. This is a recent one I found out about that probably not a lot of people know. There's a company that makes this cute little container with metal toothpicks. Toothpicks can generally be composted. I watch most people throw them in the trash, but that's one of those things, throw it in, quick boil, and it's sanitized, and you have toothpicks for life as long as you don't lose them. Yes?
Can you back up to recycling razor blades?
About them?
Where do you do that?
I'm going to get to that a little later in this presentation.
Okay.
So I'll talk to you about that. Okay, repurpose is my favorite one because it allows for a lot of creativity, and I personally like building a lot of things. So I'm going to throw a lot of slides in here kind of just to get some creative juices flowing, and we'll talk a little bit about them. This is clearly a pallet upcycle and repurpose. I'm sure many of you have seen many pallet themed upcycles. If you've ever been that person who likes to work on things, but somebody keeps losing your tools or you're misplacing them and they're ruined, and it finally becomes more economical to replace the whole set than replace the individual ones, ideas for reusing those and turning them into coat hooks. We've probably seen tons of cork type of repurposes. Those beads are actually made out of old magazines, and somebody turned them into those cute little beads. Looks like somebody's can of Amy's soup that got repurposed, and an old license plate. Ever had a chair that's broke and you can't figure out what to do with it after you've repaired it a couple times and there's literally no salvaging it? That's a unique idea. I'd never seen that before until recently. Kind of more your standard, again, another pallet upcycle, take an old piece of furniture, turn it, in this case, into a coffee bar, this in kind of a more traditional bar. This is a repurpose that came into my shop today. There is a gentleman who bought this bike for his mom, and apparently these little lights came from a semi-truck, like when they have a series of bunch of lights down the back. I don't know where he got them, and I didn't really delve into that topic today, but I was like, well, this is perfect. Can I take a picture of your bike and share it tonight? Because he took these lights that were discarded and ran them through and created more visibility for when his mom's transporting his daughter or if he's transporting his daughter on this bike. So again, it's amazing how creative people can be when they put their minds to it. This is a picture of my current dining room. So my partner is a wonderful human who tolerates all my need to collect trash and not throw it away. This dining room table is made out of old fence boards that one of the gentlemen in our neighborhood was going to just get rid of, and my partner went down with a trailer and grabbed those fence boards. It's parts here and it's parts there. We reuse these pin legs from a table that was falling apart. The board, the close-ups are in there because that kind of, if as much as possible you can maybe see that it was a fence board. We just ran it through the planer a couple times to get the bugs and the cobwebs off of it. That board is actually one of the boards, the upright. We're not done. We just stuck it in there as a holder for now, but I loved the grain on it, and again, it was the boards that was holding up the fence boards. It was the 2x4s. We cut one in half. We're creating these supports. We'll dolly it up a little more, but this is where this sits today. And I'll talk a little more on the next slide about some other things that are in this picture, not necessarily repurposing, but because they're in this picture, I'm going to talk about them. Oops, maybe it's the next picture. There we go. I'll go back to that one in a second. Things repurposing. My partner loves a specific brand of jelly. He also likes structure and organization and consistency. So slowly I'll be replacing all my other jars that don't fit a cohesive look with those jam jars for him. Metal, I used to get glass growlers. I am unfortunately one of those people that forgets it's in the back of my car and then it rolls out and crashes. So instead of wasting, I converted to metal. Even these chocolate bars around sustainability, it's not really repurposed, but we bought those when we were on a trip, and we bought them from a local farm where a couple had come in and taken over an abandoned cocoa farm. There was mold that had gotten into the cocoa, and they are slowly regenerating that property to make it useful. They're very small scale. They take a pot about this big of chocolate and they make it every 72 hours or every 3 days. So it is really, really small, but it's enough chocolate along with a couple purchases they get from some other local farmers to sustain their little cafe, and they hire local people. And again, they're regenerating that land that was kind of overused and abandoned. So those are different ways we can, look at being sustainable. Like I said, in this photo, just because it's what's in my kitchen, I'm talking about it, but a little off topic from the repurpose. This repurpose is more of those fence boards. So if you look behind me, I brought these in because these are things that I do and put out into the world for people that like them. These are fence boards. Those are used bike pads. When they're done, what do you do with a bike pad? Chain that's been stretched, I can't put that on a bike anymore. These are even the staples out of the bike boxes that come from us. So literally everything in that box, in that frame is trash, other than a couple of staples and some glue that we did to put the whole thing together. So again, lots of ways to be creative around how we repurpose things. Oops, I'm gonna go that way again. And this one's for you and Jordan, Nikki. If you don't have a way to use all your books, maybe you need a new desk. I thought I'd throw that one in there. Okay, so the next topic we'll talk about is repair. So there's a lot of things, again, we can do to repair. A lot of times we throw things away because, say, maybe it's $40 to repair it and only $50 to get a brand new one. But there's a lot of cost to our environment and our own healths when we're I think I just missaid that word, healths, when we are not repairing those items and getting new virgin materials, the manufacturing pollution that often happens to create those materials, the transportation to get it to us. And the nice part is when we repair, we support local jobs and our local economy. So I can think there's a knife sharpening place in Phoenix. They also do tools and whatnot. Here I see it cut off part of his sign, but this was me on my bike dropping off some shoes at Ye Old Cobbler. Jerry down there repaired some boots and some dress shoes for my partner and I. I am going to butcher that word, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but the Japanese art of taking broken pottery and using the gold, it actually oftentimes makes it more beautiful. And I had a floor in my shop when I took it over, the green paint was peeling off of it and it had to be removed. And instead of going through and putting more paint, I used a sealant and put some coloring in it, and then did gold in all the cracks just to make it a little more appealing instead of going through and recoating and using all these new materials that probably would have peeled up in a few years anyways. Broken valve on your washer, a lot of people throw those things away and just get rid of them. This happened to my partner and I in his house and my tiny house this year. We both had things fail. $40 on one end and $50, $60 on the other end, and we saved those things from going to landfill. And oftentimes we get into this mode of, I've got the money and I don't have the time, and we don't think about saving some of those things that can and should be repaired. Cell phones are a common one with cracked screens. Samantha's personal planters. So I don't have a picture of that, and I didn't ask my partner to grab one, but I was gifted, that's gonna roll. That's on me. Sorry. I was gifted those big potting plants. Most of us are used to growers using them here in the Rogue Valley. And some of them had holes in them. And instead of saying, oh, they're no good, let's just throw these away, we took some old pieces of plywood that were scrapped from projects that we couldn't use, put those in the hole, and then that way they were perfectly good planters. We can use those for several years until they finally fall apart instead of just discarding this otherwise mostly useful and unused thing. I'm not sure how they got the holes, but they had never been used. There was no dirt in them, and it would have been sad to just throw those in the landfill. So that's my personal planter. Recycling. So recycling is the last of the 6. It should be the last one we do, right? We should try to find the ways to repair, but when there's no other option, because sometimes plastic is the preferred way or the necessary way to go, whether it's syringes or medical things that we might need, the plastic that seals things to keep it sanitary for us. I'm thinking like the bandage papers and medical uses. There's times when it's necessary or the only way we can go. But when and if we can, we should try to choose those materials that can be recycled. I think of milk cartons or milk jugs. Milk cartons that are paper and wax coated are really hard to recycle. I don't know of a place locally that does it. There are places you can ship those to. Locally, though, we're pretty familiar with Recology and all these other waste companies around the valley that do number 1 and number 2 recycling. So choosing that over the other, if it makes sense in your world. When you do recycle, disposing according to whatever recycling agencies protocols are. Oftentimes people think, well, I'll throw this in because it's kind of similar to this and this should be recycled. The problem is they have those protocols for a reason, and when too many of us throw those things we want to get recycled but they're saying aren't recyclable, we contaminate the batch. And if there's enough contamination that they can't quickly pull out a couple items and it's a lot of contamination, then all the recycling everybody did is now going to waste, because it just becomes more cost efficient to send it to landfill than go through and try to pick out all those items. So that's one of those important things to think about. And then I put research local options for recycling. So if you're on Facebook, I'm going to plug, there's this wonderful woman, Debbie, that runs Southern Oregon Reducing Waste. She has a lot of resources. I don't have the brain capacity to remember them all off the top of my head, and I didn't have the time to pull each and every one of them from her website, but she lets people know about repair shops. She tells you about different places that will take specific items, whether it's at store locations, or she even will collect certain things from people. And when she makes a regular trip to Portland or a place that will recycle these items, she'll collect your items and take them to that location when she's headed there for another purpose anyways. So she's got a lot of great resources. Again, Southern Oregon Reducing Waste. It's a Facebook page if you are interested and want to write that down. This is where we get to the razors. So this is in my shop. I have a small shop. I can't recycle and collect everything, but I did have this weird little nook right by my door. So my door is right here. I'm not asking people to come through the bike shop. I'm not trying to get a sale. I really just want your waste to go somewhere other than landfill. There's a company called TerraCycle, which is sponsors or make sure these things get to landfill, and then there's companies that sponsor the packaging transportation. So I don't have to pay to ship these. It is not something that will get recycled locally here, but again, it's a way to collect it and get it to a place to turn it into something else. So the collections I currently have are Burt's Bees products. Burt's Bees only sponsors Burt's Bees, unfortunately, so it's a lot of cosmetic stuff. I don't really use many of theirs, but I do have some Burt's Bees chapsticks. Previously, I was only picking Burt's because at least it could be recycled. Somebody recently introduced me to Edie, and these are cardboard. I do have other cardboard things like deodorants and whatnot, things that I can't find, or things that I found in cardboard versus plastic that I throw in my backyard and it gets turned in and compost slowly over time. So there's different options, but if you're gonna go plastic, again, and use cosmetics and some of these things, mascara tubes, those are all recyclable if you have Burt's products. Colgate and Gillette are the other two sponsors. Now the great thing about Colgate and Gillette is you don't have to use Colgate and Gillette. So if you use a more sustainable, like maybe Jason's or Dr. Bronner's toothpaste, you can still recycle that there. Same if you haven't converted to a bamboo toothbrush that's getting composted and you still need the Oral-B with all the extra reach, you can recycle your plastic toothbrushes and bring them to my location. Gillette, that's the little heads, I think Venus, and is it Mach 3 or Mach 4 men? I'm not sure. But the reusable multiple head replacements, you can recycle the little pod packaging it comes in, the heads, the whole razor if you're using like the Bic ones. I take all my little razor blades and I collect them at home and I get a pile and then I stick them in. Inside of my little container there is a sharps container. So it is a safe place. You can just dump it in the hole and I can collect it and not get cut. But yeah, even this little spot, all this wood, when I put the shop together, this all came off of a gentleman's barn, the actual wood, and then like the blue wood was left over for some projects, so I slapped it up there. So in my world, I try to reuse things and repurpose them as much as possible. Toothpaste tubes.
Great.
Yep. Yeah, they've got a lot of things that company can do. They sponsor quite a few free programs. I know I've talked to a couple other local businesses. Like, it'd be great if the guitar shops would bring, recycle all the strings, the guitar strings and stuff, so people don't have to throw those away. Those odd things that people don't always metal recycle. So there's Bic pens, all sorts of different recycling opportunities with them. In my shop, I had space for 3 bins, so I threw in 3 bins.
Okay, so I can't really quite see the photo. So it's toothpaste, tubes, and
Toothbrushes.
Toothbrushes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like the toothbrush packaging, I put my cardboard in Recology, but like if there was a plastic packaging, the front part of it could go in there as well.
That's cool. And you don't have to wash the paste to the toothpaste.
Correct. They just asked you to empty it as much as possible and put the cap back on.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. And like I said, you can drop those off anytime. My shop's open. It's right in the door, so you don't have to, like I said, I'm not asking anybody to walk to the back of my shop. Okay, so how else can we affect change other than the 6 R's? So we talked a little bit about the gifts earlier. When you're gifting, think about things that are experiences, don't require resources, things that are consumable that somebody might need, want, handmade and sustainable items. When somebody does need something maybe that needs to be new, are there sustainable companies that you can think of that are using upcycled materials or have really sustainable practices, organic, good labor practices with the people that are making their products. Challenge your local shops, challenge your local eateries. Why aren't you using Rogue to Go? Have you heard of them? Are you sourcing organic? Are you sourcing a local produce? If not, why? Regular shops. So in my shop, as a business owner, I understand I have a lot of power to influence my customers. Now, I have to play a little bit to what my customers want, but I can also influence what they purchase by what I stock in my shelves. That's part of what is on this table. I brought things and choices that I've made to be more sustainable. Like many of these products that are up here are made out of bicycle tubes. So I do 3 things now with bicycle tubes. They go to a company like Alchemy Goods or Green Guru, who are going to turn them into things. Some of them get sent off for recycle. Some of them turn into jewelry that is on the floor that is kicked over. And some of them turn into artwork. These are all little bicycle tube cutouts that became this bear. So that's one way. This company, Green Guru, takes event banners that are going to get disposed of and not used and turns them into practical biking gear. These are panniers. Go for it. Yeah, question?
Are you using like a vulcanizing glue to glue it in strips, or are you running through a sewing machine to get that kind of seal?
So this is made by another company. I bring this in from another company. The things that come out of my shop are more the art stuff. Like these earrings, my mechanic actually, there's a little black gear that you are probably not going to be able to see from where you're standing. Those little gears came out of broken little shifter levers. And they put them in with a couple of beads and items and turned these into earrings. Some of the earrings on the floor have rubber and chain pieces, chain bearings. So again, I've seen some very elegant looking dressed women wear my jewelry to nice events. So it's kind of cool to see that this thing that was trash in a tire tube or a bike tube become kind of an elegant piece depending on how it's put together. So that's more the stuff that I can personally affect here. I don't have this production capability. There's a company in Colorado that does a lot of these. But again, I can choose to source from a company that's using upcycled material. And they're all mix mash, like I think that's Belgian New Belgian Ale. This is Fat Tire over on this side. I'm pretty sure the center of this is Specialized something. So, you know, you don't always get matchy things with them, but my most popular panniers that sell in my shop are my banner panniers. Not that one specifically, but a different one. And I influence that because I use them, I like them, I can talk to them. We carry, what's the big name that is eluding me, the really nice fancy Ortlieb roll-up panniers. We carry those, we carry some cheaper ones. But number one pannier that sells for me is a Dutchie made by that company. And again, just by putting them on the floor, I'm making people aware of a product that they wouldn't otherwise be aware of. Go for it, yes?
We also make really great industrial tarps for back to earth campouts, and I've found that the people who put up those signs are not inclined to usually release them to the general population, but you find out who paid to have them installed and call to ask them if you can have the ones that they take down when they trade out the emblem, they'll usually give them to you.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. So a little bit, if you didn't hear that, was about talking about the people that put those signs up and you can request to have them. I don't know how the whole process works for this company in Colorado. I know they get them shipped by the pallets. I personally haven't had any banners I've had to get rid of. But again, it's good knowing that these one-time events, you know, Earth Day 2021. Well, it's not 2021 anymore. Are we going to reuse that? If not, then where is it going to go? And this stuff is really durable. It's outside banner material. It's the perfect for biking, right? And being rain resistant or rainproof. So a couple other things I'll talk to in my shop, like this guy's made out of sailboat cloth. It actually has reinforced zipper, so it is completely waterproof. Yes, sir?
Is the appropriate person noticing that the computer is about to shut down if
Oh.
it doesn't get plugged in? I'm like,
Thank you for that. And then while she's doing that, I'll go through the last couple of things. In the bike world, I started and I didn't see another shop that had anything but plastic water bottles. And after a while of research, I found this company that's metal. So, you know, sustainability and our health, it's more than just can you reuse it? Because we can reuse those plastic bottles, but most of us at this point know that the plastic is leaching chemicals every time it's baking in the hot sun on those nice 80, 90 degree rides we do. So the little steps and things we can find to be more sustainable. These guys that are hanging over there, I actually found this company this past winter. So it's a small female-owned company in, I think they're headquartered out of Rhode Island. And all of the plasticky type materials are upcycled out of something else, whether it was old bottles or something. But when and where it is pragmatic to use something that is more synthetic, finding those companies that are reusing things that were already a synthetic material. So like the coat, the gray coat and the orange, those were synthetic materials, but they were upcycled out of something else. The wool cape that is over there was actually something, I guess there was a factory, I think it was in Massachusetts, reached out to them because of their sustainability practices and said, we have this company that's got all this material, it's dead stock, can you do something with it? If not, we're gonna send it to the landfill. And they stepped in and said, yes, let's coordinate and let's figure out how we reuse that, and they came up with that wool cape. And that's really sad that we would, you know, harvest all those resources, but for some companies, it's easier just to throw it away than to deal with it. So it's really nice when you can find those companies that do wanna step in. And I think, let's see, what else? The last thing is, I know this company makes this out of fishing nets scraped out of the ocean and turns these into bike panniers. So I'm sure there's a million other companies out there doing wonderful things. I can't cover them all. But as a business owner, that is front and center of my mind of like, how do I do my part beyond just what I'm consuming at home, beyond what I can do with my own personal decisions, how do I make a difference as a business owner? And then buying groceries, we talked about things in reusable containers. Conspire to collaborate. So this is a really big problem that a lot of us are passionate about, and it is easy to get kind of overwhelmed by everything, right? And none of us have all the solutions, nor can we do all the things in a perfect world. Finding the people we can collaborate with to do our own little things and being open to those. So one that's coming to mind right now, I do not know if this will turn into something, but I met this really wonderful guy who had bought bikes from the previous owner. He came to me and wanted to help save some old bikes that have been collecting dust in his shop and donate them to some people that really needed help. So we found a couple of folks in the neighborhood. One of them is here in Ashland. His wife met the other one through some community service she was doing in Medford. That gentleman got an electrified bike. And the other young woman, she actually works at Razi and Falafel and has a third job while she's putting herself through nursing school. So definitely the type of person that we would love to help. He's now brewing because he's looking close to being that retired agent here in a year and a half or so. How does he put together a bunch of people that have resources, i.e. bikes sitting around collecting dust that nobody's using, and people that maybe want to do good and help people in the community to create a nonprofit? Don't know if it will come to fruition, but that's a great idea, and I will do whatever I can to facilitate it, because there's so many people I know can't afford my bikes and need people like him who have old bikes that they want to fix up on their own money to give to other people for free. So I would love to see that happen. I know there's a million collaborations going on in this world, and if I had more time, I would talk about many more of those. Advocate locally, statewide, and federally. So, there are some things that are being driven by consumer behavior, and some things that are not going to change until we ask our local, state, and federal governments to change those. I think one of the ones that I have is this picture. So Oregon right to repair bill passes the Senate. It's going to go to the House. This right to repair bill really only talks about like cell phones and electronics. That should be a bigger bill. I'm not going to knock it. It's a step in the right direction, and we can't have the whole pie all at once every time. But places in Europe have a right to repair around a lot more of their items, so we're not just constantly being forced to throw things away, or they're not being constantly forced to throw things away because it's cheaper to buy a new one because there's no way to repair it without going through all this huge expense. So advocating for those types of things within our communities, advocating for infrastructure to make things more bike-friendly. And it's not just about e-bikes, it's about bikes, it's about walking. There's people that don't bike ride because they don't feel safe doing it. So what ways can we advocate to make these things easier and make being sustainable more available to people? Because let's face it, sometimes sustainable stuff is more expensive. And if you're a single mom on a low-income budget, maybe you can't ever afford the sustainable item. You have to go with the cheap thing made in a factory across the sea. So that's another way to advocate. And kind of lastly, keep talking about it. You never know when you're going to be the one that gets someone else to think about things differently. I'll get to you in a second. I'm almost wrapped up, so we'll just kind of go there. And on that note, I know there have been things in my world, in my life, whether it's been sustainability or something else, where you hear something a million times and you're like, yeah, I know I should do that, right? Or you think about it, but for some reason, it doesn't ever click with you and incentivize you to do it. And I think often for me, those are things around health. I've been a high-strung, high-energy person my whole life. I definitely need more meditation. I've heard about meditation for years, but it took the right person in the right context before I actually really started doing it. Now again, it's imperfect, I need more of it, but just the right person and the way they said it, it clicked in my head. And part of it was probably I was at the right time in my life to receive that. So we mostly know all these things. Most of us have heard about reduce, reuse, recycle, and many of these ways to save, but it's about having that conversation and doing it differently because you might be the right person for somebody else. And this is one of my favorite quotes is, we don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. So keeping that space to know that maybe that is that single mom. Don't judge her. She's working 3 jobs and spending every penny replacing boots and coats and shoes for her kids and putting food on the table. Or somebody's going through a lot of life changes and there's so much stress because they're taking care of ailing parents that separating all the recycle isn't the thing they're concerned about right now. Having that grace for those people, but then finally having grace for yourself. I know there are a number of times in my world, I care so much about this, I feel like I'm not doing enough, and you will drive yourself crazy. You will never get it all right. You will never be perfect about it. So hold space for others, but hold that space for yourself as well. thank you for my short notice speech. I hope you got something out of it. If you have a question, happy to answer it.
Just a piece of information, Senator Merkley is going to be at SOU on Sunday for a,
Yes.
so
Yeah, that's a good
we'll
one.
promote more of this stuff at the federal level also.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's a great one. Again, short notice. There's a bunch of things I would have loved to stick in here and made it a little more cohesive, maybe, but I got what I got.
You would tell me, please?
I'm in that crazy place. I have to buy these plastic water things for my CPAP machine. And I think they're recyclable, and I read there's a number on these jugs, 1, 3, or 5, and I can't find the numbers anywhere, and I'm not sure what to do, and they're starting to pile up.
Okay. Without knowing brand stuff, I would maybe reach out to Debbie if you can't get it. I mean, I'm happy to take some time if you want to wander into my shop sometime and ask me, and I will try to hunt that down for you. But I don't have any specific knowledge of that right now.
And prescription drug bottles. Is there a way to recycle those? Do you know? I've looked everywhere. I can't.
I feel like Debbie might have had a resource on that Southern Oregon. I think that's where I saw it. I don't have a lot of prescriptions myself, so I'm not certain. I know TerraCycle also has one, but I don't think they have a free program right now. So I would check that Southern Oregon page if you have Facebook and see if it's on there. Yes.
Most of the time, the numbers are within the triangle that's usually printed on the bottom middle of the vessel. And generally speaking, the bottom middle of the vessel is where the recycling information can most commonly be found.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Yes.
I was glad to see you allude to the right to repair law, but I was wondering if you had any insights into what that's actually going to mean for us as consumers of electronics.
So if it passes in its current version, of the limited knowledge I have of the bill, is basically like there's certain things that you have to go through Apple for, and they're gonna, I think it's by 2025, don't quote me on that, but I think it's by that time they have to make it more available so that any local repair person could come in and fix and repair this item versus having to take it to an Apple store. So it's not, there's some repairs we can already do, right? Like we could go to Mobile Madness and get our screens replaced right now, but I think it's more of the componentry within the devices. It's a small step. E-waste is a big one. That's probably why it was getting targeted, because of the raw materials, the metals and stuff that are needed. I mean, again, I'd love to see that more on a mass scale, and like, I see these things in Europe, like there are literally malls in Europe where you go in and it's repair shop after repair shop. Maybe this one specializes in shoes, and this one specializes in leather goods, and this one specializes in electronics, and this one sharpens the tools. And here's a furniture store that's all upcycled stuff that was maybe trashed for one reason and got a fresh coat of paint. Like there, lamp stores all upcycled. So there are places where it's been made easier, things aren't made in a way that it's easier to throw it away. And Europe, as far as I'm aware, as countries go, is leading more of that front. We've got a lot of catch up to do, but they're an older culture, and there's reasons that probably, they're in that space that we're not, but they're a great space to, look up to, and the word I'm looking for is not coming to me, but model and replicate what they're doing and bring that here to the U.S. And I think we can start doing that in small ways. I think many shops and stuff around this country are doing that. Like again, Edie, this chapstick company, I got beeswax wraps from them years ago. I had completely forgotten about them because I haven't had to replace my beeswax wraps, but my accountant actually brought me this, and she's like, I don't know if you know about these guys, and gave this to me, and I looked on their website, and they have tons of more sustainable products. Package Free is a company that does a bunch of different sustainable products. That's actually where I found out about the leaf razor, so I didn't have to keep buying disposables. So there's a lot of people that are trying to forward our progress there. Some of it's just getting it out in the public awareness, and that's where, again, talking to people, if you know, and sharing, businesses like mine being conduits for that, that's how we're going to get there. Any other questions, comments? No? Well, thank you all for tolerating me. I appreciate you guys coming.